Have you had a falling out with a family member, and would you like to find a way to mend that relationship? Well, I've got a couple of people who you'll be interested to hear from. Rachel Hannam is a psychologist at North Brisbane Psychologists who deals often with people that are feuding with their family. And Sam Bowden is a comedian who had a falling out with his family late last year. Sam, hello.
G'day, Ashwin.
What happened?
Oh, it's a long story, and it's got its funny moments. So my grandparents had their 60th wedding anniversary. You know, the one where you give them like tin or silver or
it's
diamonds.
diamond almost.
Something like that.
Yeah.
You get a letter from the Queen congratulating you for making it that long.
Yeah.
And there was a big blow up because there's history there with that side of the family in regards to like me and my dad and my stepmom in particular. It's always a step parent, I've found. And so there was a big bust up there that evening because there was an open bar as well, that might add. And she kind of worked me up because she's quite a Machiavellian piece of work. And I just took the bait and I sort of responded.
What did she work you up? Did she know your hot buttons to hit?
Yeah, she knows my hot buttons. Like, we've known each other for ages, and so we know how to work each other up. And so it was very clear that she didn't want to be there, and it was getting very palpable. And then I was trying to have a nice conversation with her, with my auntie, and she was there, and she was just death staring me the entire time. I was like, let it go, let it go. And then she wouldn't stop death staring me. So like a little evil kid, I just do one of the yeah, no, and I knew it would blow up, and I was like, shouldn't have done that, but it's too late now. And she did, and she made a big fuss over it, and she went absolutely nuts. And then when they were leaving, I tried to explain it to my dad, and then I made an offhanded remark that got her going again. And then Dad came back and started swinging at me, and then my brother jumped in, and then Dad started swinging at Ned, and then I saw red and jumped back in, and then Ned tackled my dad into a bush, but my dad had me by the collar, so we all went in 1, 2, 3. All of us fell into the bush together, like a really sort of dark Monty Python sketch.
Yeah.
And I sort of fall off and my glasses get knocked off. And so I'm pulling a Velma where I'm like, my glasses, where are my glasses? Meanwhile, I didn't realize Dad was working my brother's ribs. And I get up, and then I get up sort of the same time Dad gets up, and he storms off. And my stepmom, she was just standing there rubbing her hands together. Yes, this is exactly what I wanted.
This phrase, my dad was working my brother's ribs, that's something that you don't hear very often. Do you often have fist fights in your family?
Oh, no. When you're young, my brother and I, we're only 3 years apart, and we're besties, right? But we grew up throwing each other into the drywall.
Yeah.
And then that sort of all subsides, and, you be adults. And then, yeah, that happened. And that was realistically the first major physical altercation in that regard.
And what was the result of it?
Oh, we just haven't spoken. So, it's kind of weird. It's strange because, there's always been issues there, but we haven't spoken. But the whole family is having to find this balance on that side between sort of supporting my dad, but also being yeah, he married an absolute trope of a woman, and we've been having to deal with it ever since.
Rachel, I might bring you here. Is that common for some of your clients to end up in a bush?
To end up in a bush?
After a fist
I
fight?
haven't heard that one too many times.
Well, what do you make
it was more of a hedge.
Okay.
To be fair.
Right.
It was like a hedgerow.
It's a middle-class bush.
Yeah.
But Rachel, this is obviously serious. How often is it that you find patients feud with a step-parent that comes into the family?
It's actually quite common. There's, the 40%, 45% divorce rate in Australia, so blended families and people remarrying. This is quite a common phenomenon in Australia, and it comes with a whole heap of challenges. Biological families can be challenging enough, but then when there's no genetic or biological connection there, forgiveness doesn't come as easily. I'm a step parent, and my husband's a step parent, so I have step parents myself. So personally, I have first-hand experience of the subtle but powerful differences that exist in the relationship between biological members of a family versus step parents, stepchildren, step siblings.
So whether it's biological or a step parent, what are some ways that you can repair a broken relationship like this?
What about pistols at dawn?
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest that.
Oh,
You
okay.
might go to jail. Yeah, leaving violence aside, because that never makes anything better. I think the first step is to acknowledge your emotional response to it. If you're angry, then let yourself be angry for a while. You're allowed to feel angry. If underneath that anger, which we call in psychology a secondary emotion, is usually some primary emotions. We're hurt, or we're disappointed and saddened, or maybe we're scared about what's going to happen in the future. But, underneath the anger, we're usually feeling something pretty vulnerable. We've been threatened or hurt in some way by the experience. So processing those emotions until there's a little bit of release. So sometimes a good therapist or coach or counsellor can help you do that, or any kind of person who's able to just sit with you and hear the truth and tell the truth. So, maybe a good friend. Until you're a little bit calmer and perhaps more ready to, open up a dialogue with the relevant family member.
That's good advice. Thank you. I was just going to push it down until it made a tumour. But I like that strategy.
Yeah, that's an option. It's an option.
It's probably the most common option. Are there some people that you just don't get on with? And if they happen to be family members, you shouldn't so much focus on patching things up. There's just some people don't have good chemistry.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there could be a whole raft of, pretty complex and subtle reasons why, people just trigger each other. Even the sight or the presence of that person, maybe you've got history, or just maybe there's some bad chemistry. That definitely happens. And, I think there's a place for strategic or tactical avoidance of people. I think that's an act of self-care. When you make a decision, I'm going to steer clear of that person.
What if it's someone that you do want to keep in your life and you've processed your emotions, so you're on top of that? What's the next step to try and patch up the relationship?
Well, I think, if you've got someone you can talk to, whether it's a good friend or family member or a good therapist or someone else, then you can work through those emotions, let go of some of them, begin to forgive. Forgiveness is a process, and open up a dialogue. Ask them if, they have some time where they could talk to you on the phone or face-to-face. I would not recommend doing anything like this over email or text message or Facebook, because not being able to hear the voice.
I've been tweeting her constantly.
Yeah,
that's not a good idea.
You've mainly been using memes.
Yeah, I've been using very sort of passive-aggressive memes on Twitter and Tumblr.
It's so good having you, Rachel, to
How's
work
that
through.
working out for you, Sam?
Well, not good. She doesn't have Twitter, so I had to make an account for her, and I think I'm developing a psychosis.
Right. Well, instead of, making memes to try and resolve conflict, it's probably better to pick up the phone or make a time to catch up face-to-face. All the research supports, don't try and manage conflict in writing. Sometimes that's warranted, actually, but I think it's preferable to actually speak and own your part in it. If there are things that you did that, weren't particularly skillful, that weren't particularly helpful, and get yourself to a point where you're able to be honest about that and say, look, I didn't handle that as well as I'd like, and I know I did X, Y, and Z, and I know that didn't help, and I just wanted to say sorry for that.
Long term, what is the impact of broken relationships on our well-being?
It depends on the person and how important they are to us in our lives. So, Sam, your example with your stepmother, when did she come into your life? At what age were you?
I think I was like 11. And maybe, about 11, 12. And
Right.
that was all good because, she had lollipops and I didn't have opinions. And so it
Yes.
it makes for a good dynamic.
And then things change as you get older and become an adult. So, but by 11 or 12, a lot of your formative years have already happened. So, that person's probably not as significant in your life as a biological parent or another caregiver who you've known since you were very small. And still, they're a figure in your life. And it creates stress when you need to see them or when there's conflict with them. But I guess it depends on the level of attachment you have to people. I work with clients in my practice whose attachments or bonds are seriously impaired or damaged with their biological parents or with siblings. And that's very painful for people most of the time. And, it's quite a bit of work for them to finally make their peace with the fact that that's how it is and maybe how it always will be, and it certainly has an effect on their well-being until they look at it and get support for that.
Yeah, it's just something that can be quite insidious, because I was reading an article that was saying loneliness can be as harmful to you as smoking in terms of your heart risk, and so, but it's not something you know about. So the effects of bad relationships are quite subtle and insidious, aren't they?
That's not good, because I love to punch a dart by myself.
Yes, so
that's double whammy.
Yeah.
There's a difference between being alone and enjoying solitude and feeling lonely.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's how it is for you on the inside. And we know that feeling all alone in the world and lonely, like you have no support or no attachments, is one of the worst feelings for human beings, and it isn't good for our health. It produces quite a lot of cortisol in the body, which is a stress hormone, and that cortisol has an effect on the tissues of our body. It suppresses our immune system, and it is related to different forms of chronic disease, autoimmune diseases, things like that, for sure.
All right, just a closing thought for anyone who might be looking to repair a broken relationship, Rachel?
Process the emotions, and then get some advice from someone you trust or from a good website, and make a plan and open up a dialogue.
Sam, any thoughts from you about how not to get into a fist fight with your stepmum?
Well, no, it was with my dad. Let me clarify that.
Sorry, I forgot that.
I didn't end this by beating the crap out of a 53-year-old woman. Okay, that's not. That is not what I want to end on.
With your father.
Any advice for that? Yeah, here's an idea. If there's tension in the room, don't neck 12 Tooheys Old Dark Ales. And maybe just be a little bit more of an adult about the whole situation.
And just from what you've heard from Rachel, is there anything you can take away and use in the next few months?
There is, but if it's okay with you, Rachel, some of that advice I might repurpose for other relationships. Because I'm like, that's good, and that's good. I'm like, oh, man, I tried that in 2011 and 2012, and then I went overseas, and I tried it again, and it just... Yeah, it's better advice than my last therapist, though. Because when I told him, he was like, do you still have her number? And I was like, yeah. He was like, why don't you just put a bunch of ads up on Craigslist and see what happens? So at least you're a professional.
Yes.
And what happened?
I actually decided not to do that with the advice of my friend. He's like, that's really funny until you get criminal charges pressed against you. I was like, yeah, that's a fair point.
No, Rachel,
don't let a bad relationship ruin your life. As in, don't let it ruin future endeavours. That's actually what he said.
Oh, that's wise advice too.
Yeah.
Rachel Hannam is from North Brisbane, psychologist, and Sam Bowden is a local comedian who had a fist fight with his dad, not his stepmom. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ashwin.